BBC World. Shipping halts in Strait of Hormuz as Iranian officials calls for Trump to lift fully blockade. President Trump's very good conversations are happening with Tehran, but the US won't be blackmailed over the major waterway. Ships have again come to a standstill around the Strait of Hormuz after Iran resumes its blockade, with marine traffic tracking websites showing no boats crossing the major waterway. Iran's parliamentary speaker calls the US to seize the US seats of Iran's boats foolish, but says progress has been made in talks despite both countries remaining far from peace deal. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump says very good conversations are happening with Iran, but adds that he won't let Tehran blackmail the US over the strait. Trump says the blockade will continue. Our transaction with Iran is 100% complete, while Iran says the strait will remain closed until the US lifts its seats. The only bit of light in this dark mediators are still exchanging messages. Two Iranian gunboats opened fire on a tanker on the Strait of Hormuz, while other ships report being hit by unknown projectiles over the weekend. There is in effect a double blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians say they are targeting any shipping trying to get through the vital waterway, while the Americans are imposing their naval blockade on Iran's Gulf ports. In normal times, you have about 140 ships passing both ways through the strait to collect oil, gas, fertilizer, and other products. But only a trickle of ships has been getting through since the conflict started. Iran is insisting all maritime traffic goes up a new route set by them to be inspected by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Navy, and in some cases pay a toll. That is unacceptable to the international shipping community. Like it would be like imposing a toll on English Channel, so any ships coming down from the North Sea would have to stop off at Folkestone or Calais and be inspected. The distance of the waterway is the same as the English Channel at the shortest navigable part of the Strait of Hormuz. Everything has ground to stand still until the US and Iran agree on talks. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned the US decision to extend the period during which Russia is allowed to sell oil despite Western sanctions. The move means countries can purchase Russian oil and petroleum product already loaded on vessels at sea until 16th of May. The US argues that the waiver is meant to ease the energy supply crunch sparked by the US-Israel war with Iran. But in his remarks on Sunday, Zelensky said every dollar paid for Russian oil is money for the war in Ukraine. Widespread sanctions have been placed against Russia since President Vladimir Putin launched his full-scale invasion of its neighbor in February 2022. The devastating US and Israeli attacks against Iran have prompted it to retaliate not only against Israel and US military bases in the Gulf, but also against energy facilities and other civilian sites across Arab allies of the US in the region. Additionally, Iran has virtually shut the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow passageway where some 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas is usually transported through. This has led to turmoil in energy markets, with fears that a world recession may ensue if it is not reopened soon. The US move to ease Russian sanctions on 13th of May was widely condemned by Zelensky, as well as his European allies. In extending the waiver on Friday, the US said it wanted to ensure oil is available to those who need it, as negotiations to end the war accelerate. Ukrainian leaders said Russia had more than 110 tankers from its shadow fleet vessels, which obscured ownership designed to help it bypass sanctions, with over 12 million tons of oil. Their sale, he added, would bring 10 billion to Moscow coffers as a resource that is directly converted into new strikes against Ukraine. The Ukrainian leader did not explain what those figures were based on, but he added that just over the past week, Russia had launched over 2,360 attack drones, more than 1,320 guided aerial bombs, and nearly 60 missiles of various types at our cities and communities. That included the deadliest attack against Ukraine in months in 15th of April, during which more than 700 drones and missiles were used in multiple waves in one night, killing at least 18 people. Ukraine has also attacked Russia, particularly focusing on energy facilities. However, despite ongoing attacks, the stalemate has been reached in the war in Ukraine, with Russia in control of about 20% of Ukrainian territory. Efforts led by the US to end the war have been put on hold as a result of the war in Iran. Pope Leo says he was not seeking to debate Donald Trump when he criticized tyrants for spending billions on wars in a speech earlier this week. The pontiff said that the remarks delivered days after a high-profile spat with the US president had been written fortnight earlier, well before the president even commented on myself. And yet as it happens, it was looked at as if I was trying to debate again the president, which is not in my interest at all. he told reporters aboard a flight to Angola on Saturday. On Monday, Trump launched a scathing attack on the first American pope, who has been a vocal critic of the US-Israel military operation in Iran as a terrible for foreign policy. Pope, who was on a tour of Africa, said a certain narrative that has not been accurate had developed, citing the political situation created by Trump's comments. In response to the plaintiff's latest remarks, US Vice President J.D. Vance, who converted to Catholicism as an adult, said he was grateful to Pope Leo for saying this. But the media narrative constantly gains up conflict, and yes, real disagreements have happened and will happen. The reality is often much more complicated, Vance added. Earlier in the week, before the Pope's speech referring to tyrants, Vance had urged the Vatican to stick to matters of morality. During the speech in Cameroon on Thursday, the Pope had criticized leaders who turn a blind eye to the fact that billions of dollars are spent on killing and devastation, yet the resources needed for healing, education, and restorations are nowhere to be found. The masters of war pretend to know that it takes only a moment to destroy, yet often a lifetime is not enough to rebuild. The Pope also condemned an endless cycle of destabilization and death, and a bloodstained region of Cameroon that had been crippled by insurgency for nearly a decade. The remarks were interpreted by some as reference to Trump, who later told reporters the Pope can say what he wants, and I want him to say what he wants, but I can disagree. He had initially posed his lengthy criticism of the leader of the Catholic Church after Pontiff had voiced concern about Trump threat that a whole civilization will die if Iran did not agree to US demands to end the war and open the Strait of Hormuz. President said he was not a big fan of the Pope and called him weak on crime and terrible on foreign policy. Trump also posted an AI-generated image of himself as a Jesus-like figure, which he later removed. Catholic leaders Africa tour includes 11 stops in cities across 4 countries. It is his second major foreign visit since being elected to the papacy last year, and reflects the importance of Catholicism in Africa. More than a fifth of the whole world's Catholics, from 288 million people, live in Africa, according to figures from 2024. Building of Trump's White House ballroom can resume in full, appeals court says. Construction of the underground and above ground portions of US President Donald Trump's White House ballroom will be allowed to continue, an appeals court has ruled. US Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia granted an administrative stay after the Trump administration appealed against US District Judge Richard Leon's decision to halt above ground construction on Thursday. Construction is now expected to continue until the next hearing, which is due to take place on 5th of June. This week's rulings came after the appeals court ordered the judge to reconsider the national security implications of halting the work after he temporarily blocked all construction of the ballroom in March. The ruling marks a victory for the president and his effort to redesign the storied American structure. Leon said on Thursday that he thought the project required congressional approval, adding that the administration reclassifying the ballroom plans as vital for national security appeared to be an attempt to work around. National security is not a blank check to proceed with otherwise unlawful activity, he wrote. Following the ruling, Trump took to Truth Social to accuse the judge of attempting to prevent future presidents and world leaders from having a safe and secure large-scale meeting place. It's all tied together as one big, expensive, and very complex unit, which is vital for national security and military operations of the United States of America, he wrote, adding that the underground complex would include bomb shelters and medical facilities. He also said the ballroom was needed now and that no judge can be allowed to stop it. The Justice Department filed an appeal against Leon during Thursday, arguing it would imperil the president and national security and infinitely leave a large hole beside the executive residence. BBC has contacted the White House for comment. The judge temporarily halted the construction project late March, ruling that proper procedures were not followed before it had begun. The decision came after the White House was sued by National Trust of Historic Preservation. The preservation group lawsuit filed last year alleges that White House broke the law when it started construction of the ballroom and bunker without filing plans with the National Capital Planning Commission and by deciding to seek authorization from Congress. The east wing of the White House, constructed in 1902, was demolished in October to make way for the multi-million-dollar ballroom, which will have capacity for 1,350 guests. The White House has said the project was expected to cost $400 million and was being funded entirely by private donors. Democratic Republic of Congo accepts first set of deportees from the US. 15 people have deported from the US who are reportedly from South America have arrived in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is the first group of unknown number of people that the US has expelled, which the Democratic Republic of Congo has agreed to take in. The government in Kinshasa has stressed that their stay in the country is only temporary and that Washington is funding their reception, support, and care. The US has already sent deportees to several other African countries, including Ghana, South Sudan, Eswatini, as part of the crackdown on immigration. Earlier this month, when the details of deportation deal first emerged, the Congolese government said the decision to receive what are known as third country migrants, that is, those who come from neither the sending nor the receiving nation, aligns with the commitment to human dignity, to protecting the rights of immigrants and international solidarity. The Congolese authorities also said that the scheme was not a permanent relocation mechanism or an outsourcing of migration policies. The US State Department said that while it did not comment on diplomatic communications with other governments, the administration remained unwavering in its commitment to end illegal and mass immigration and bolster America's border security. The US has deported dozens of people to third countries since President Donald Trump came to power in January last year as part of its hardline approach towards immigration. The individuals concerned are admitted to the national territory under short stay permits in accordance with national legislation concerning the entry and residence of foreigners, a Congolese government statement said on Friday without giving any more details about the deportees. But the sources as in the yearly international airport, where a group landed in early hours on Friday, told the BBC that they were mostly Colombians and Peruvians. According to my minority report from the US Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, the Trump administration has likely spent more than 40 million in third country deportations up to January 2026, although total cost is unknown. US has provided more than 32 million directly to 5 countries: Ecuador, Guinea, Rwanda, El Salvador, Eswatini, and Palau, it added. The US is also negotiating a minerals deal with Democratic Republic of Congo to help gain access to the Central African country's vast reserves of key metals such as cobalt, tantalum, lithium, and copper. Under Trump, the US has facilitated a peace deal between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, although implementation remains a challenge. At the conclusion of a fresh round of talks between the Congolese government and the Rwanda-backed M23 rebels, both sides, who have been fighting in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, say they will allow humanitarian aid, protect civilians and their infrastructure, and begin monitoring a permanent ceasefire. Delegates at the negotiations in Switzerland, mediated by US and Qatar, said they were encouraged by their process towards ending the conflict. Rwanda has repeatedly denied supporting the M23 despite overwhelming evidence, saying its military presence is a defensive measure against threats to its security by armed groups in Democratic Republic of Congo. destination Africa? Is it legal for US to deport foreign criminals to the continent? The US administration has turned to the African continent as another destination to deport migrants who it says are convicted criminals. While dozens have been flown to countries in Central and South America, 12 men from countries including Mexico, Myanmar, and Yemen were last month sent to Eswatini and South Sudan. One South Sudanese was also flown back home. Other African countries are also reportedly being courted by the US to accept people whose home countries will not take them back, according to the US authorities. President Donald Trump's mass deportation pledge drew support during his campaign last year, but the United Nations rights experts and human rights groups are alarmed by what has happened and argue that the removals to a nation that is not the migrant's place of origin, also known as third countries, could violate international law. Is third country deportation legal in international law? The third country deportations can be legal, but only under certain conditions. The whole concept of third country removal has to be seen in the light of the broader concept of asylum, said Professor Abe Brescia from Albany Law School in the US. There's a principle of international law, non-refoulement, which means you are not supposed to return someone to their home country if it's unsafe for them. So a third country could provide a safe option, he says. The principle not only applies to migrants' home country, but also to any third country they might be sent to. If that country is unsafe, deportation may violate international law, as when the UK Supreme Court blocked British government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda in 2023. Due process is also essential. Migrants must have the chance to challenge deportations if the destination is dangerous, based on the evidence from credible resources like the UN reports or US State Department findings. Courts are expected to assess this risk carefully. The court should examine what kind of legal status migrants have, if they'll be detained, and what kind of housing is provided, says Dr. Alice Edwards, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on torture and other cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. But many migrants struggle to access legal support in time. It takes significant effort to access to a lawyer who can act quickly, says Professor Brescia. The legal route may not be available to everyone. Do the Eswatini and South Sudan deportations violate international law? They certainly do in two respects, says Professor David Super from Georgetown University Law Center. There's no evidence the US is giving people a chance to challenge their deportation, and they're not permitted to send people to countries where they might face oppression. South Sudan and Eswatini have serious questions about their human rights records, he tells BBC. While the migrants were first bound for South Sudan in May, a legal challenge was filed in the US District Court after the flight had already taken off. Judge ruled that the attempts to deport the men had violated his order that migrants must be allowed to challenge their removal to third countries. The plane was recalled to Djibouti on East African coast, where the men were reportedly held in a shipping container on a US military base where the case was heard. The case was referred to the Supreme Court, which allowed the deportations to proceed, but did not specify whether South Sudan was deemed as a safe place for the migrants. What we have seen in similar cases is that people are often denied legal help when they need it, and proceedings being far too late, says Dr. Edwards. In this case, they were already en route to US military base, and that's deeply problematic. She adds that the courts must explain a political, especially when basic rights are at stake. Repeat, she adds that courts must remain apolitical, especially when basic rights are at stake. Professor Brescia warns that the Supreme Court decision could set a dangerous precedent. There's a real concern it will encourage the administration to move even faster before individuals can access the courts at all, he says. Are Eswatini and South Sudan safe? In addition to being denied due process, migrants are being sent to potentially unsafe countries violating international law. The US State Department currently advises against all travel to South Sudan, citing threats including crime, armed conflict, and kidnapping. Earlier this year, the country, one of the poorest in the world, was said to be brink of a return to civil war. There are very real concerns about law and order in South Sudan, about violence, instability, and ongoing conflict, says Dr. Edwards. Those deported to South Sudan are reportedly being held in a detention facility in the capital, Juba, known for poor conditions, including the political activist H.L. Rich Machar. The government has not confirmed their location or how they are being spent. They will spend, or how long they will spend in detention. We don't foresee they will stay long enough to be integrated into society. Tabile Miliuli, Eswatini government spokesperson. In Eswatini, small landlocked kingdom in southern Africa, officials say the migrants are in a correctional facility and will be repatriated with support from the International Organization of Migration. The US State Department says Eswatini's prisons face problems of overcrowding, poor ventilation, and deficiencies in dietary nutrition and health services. We don't foresee they will stay long enough to be integrated into society. Okay, the same quote. Eswatini government spokesperson Tabile Muluti told the BBC, without giving any indication of how long they will stay in the country or whether they would serve the rest of their sentences first. The US government says those who have been deported to Eswatini committed barbaric crimes including child rape, murder, and sexual assault. Backlash is growing in Eswatini. The country's largest opposition party, the People's United Democratic Movement, Podemo, says that the agreement between the two countries was human trafficking disguised as a deportation deal. Pro-democracy activist Luke Haley says the country must not become a dumping ground for criminals, even if international law has been violated. Professor Super says the US is unlikely to face consequences as it doesn't recognize many international courts. This appeal appears to be about deterrence, sending a message that if you come to the US, you'll be treated very, very harshly, he says. Regardless of legality, third country deportations often place vulnerable individuals in unfamiliar environments with little support or legal status, says Dr. Edwards. It's a deeply flawed idea. She stresses that the human rights community is not trying to block each and every deportation, only where people face human rights violations. What's in it for the host countries? The details of deportations still remain largely secret. Ms. Diuli tells the BBC that Eswatini's reasons for accepting the deportees remains classified information for now. However, both Eswatini and South Sudan governments cited their strong ties with the US as a key motivation. Professor Brescia suggests some countries may fear US retaliation if they refuse, such as stricter visa rules or higher tariffs. In April, the US said it would revoke all visas issued to South Sudanese nationals after it would not accept a deported citizen. After it would not accept a deported citizen. It is not clear if that has changed now that it has accepted deportees from the US. Political activist Massa says South Sudan has also agreed to this deal as it wants the US to lift sanctions on Vice President Benjamin Bolmel. The United States government issued sanctions against Bolmel in 2021 due to alleged corruptions and renewed them this year. However, other countries like Nigeria are pushing back. We have enough problems of our own, Nigerian Foreign Minister Yusuf Tugat said in July, rejecting the request to take in Venezuelan detainees. Dr. Edward notes that such deals often come with incentives. In past agreements, the third country deportations, large sums of money, as well as military security cooperation, were part of the package. In March, reports said the Trump administration would pay El Salvador $6 million to accept Venezuelan deportees. Yeah, maybe I will quit this live now.